G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for 12th of July 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Ellsbound, and Erotic Tales from the Empire, Part 1 coming soon. I'd like to thank the patrons and other supporters who help make this channel possible. You can support the channel by buying my books, buying my merch, as well as joining my Patreons. All my links are in the link tree. Handy little website that basically allows you to list and organize your links. Not sponsored. Alright, so the news. The news is much of the same. They often do this. You'll see 3-4 times they'll repeat the same stories in a cycle per day. Everybody takes a turn, because the party has to be all inclusive, and you have to hear voices of unity as they confirm each other's biases. Now, you may not know this, and many people do not like Fox. But right now, Fox is one of the few profitable news services left in operation that is not state-sponsored. CNN has been state-sponsored for a long time, and they're not profitable, even with state sponsorship. And the top 10 news right now in the world, primarily Fox. Even BBC's fallen, and BBC used to be number 1. Fox used to be number 3. There was a time CNN was number 1, then number 2, then number 3. They have fallen far. Maddow, even on repeats, does better on repeat than current Maddow. Maddow and others are just, people are sick of them repeating the same stories because we have eyes. But the party's order is final. You believe the party, not your lying eyes. So they repeat the same stories over and over and over again. There were so many drones, we shot them all down, we only shot down half, the rest got lost, they only hit civilian targets, and over and over and over again, the party's always right, comrades. Why did they do this? Because repetition is how people learn. Remember, when you went to school, they didn't give you a textbook as once. Every year they gave you pretty much almost the same textbook over and over and over again. And only at the end did they start to ramp up, where they increased the difficulty level. Now, as you can see, Russia has hit several targets across Ukraine. But, of course, the majority of combat is Kursk and all the other... Nope. Ukraine has reported only a few incidences they have. And, again, Russia has confirmed this, that there was damage to the aircraft bureau at Tula and the aviation plant. So, while Russia reports damage, Ukraine does not. And you can see the overwhelming majority of damage. One aircraft took off. Airborne missiles are the most common, but occasionally they do a big seaborne and air and sea. But of course, this is the day after their biggest attack, which was twice the size of their previous attack, which was they've increased. And we expect to see, probably midweek or maybe Tuesday another attack. We're going to see about 2 a week. Because Russia does very often its attacks, but it's now averaging about 3.5. Now, this is interesting because it's not a news story, but it's a news story from the Russians' perspective, and that is the EU has confirmed that it is not interested in funding Ukraine to retake its lost territories. And according to the World Bank, the damage Ukraine has suffered so far is about 500 billion. Rebuilding is going to take decades, and most of it is lost. Never going to be brought back. Confusing about the estimates is the cost, and that is the human toll that's unfathomable what Zelensky's done to Ukraine over the last year, fighting over territory, losing more territory, and then expecting the rest of the world to come to his rescue. But the thing is, what happens to Russia's frozen assets and Ukraine's reconstruction? Well, what's going to happen is, and as many have pointed out, Europe has lost more. Okay? The more Europe takes off Russia, the more Russia has abandoned its reserves in Europe, and is likely to win any lawsuit in the international court eventually. Legal experts have said they have no right. They cannot take that unless they declare war on Russia, which is suicide. But every time they take something off Russia, Russia's already hurt them. And going to hurt them again and again. This is the Russian mindset. When Russia hurts you, they expect to be hurt, and then they'll hurt you back in return, playing the victim. This is throughout history. And it's not unique to Russia. Everybody's done it. It's just a Russian mindset that has set it. For some reason, people only associate this with Russia. But Ukraine and Russia have had a toxic relationship. We are friends, we're not friends. Ukraine seems to think that it's somehow as big and as important. See, this is the problem. Ukraine has always done this. They've always thought they're bigger and more important than they really are. They only wanted to be friends with Russia to get that sweet Russian occupation money, rebuild them. They only wanted Russia around when they were rebuilding. Once they built everything, they say, yes, go away now, we will operate it. And every time they get into trouble, they say, please come back and help us. And they expect you to do this out of the kindness of their heart. But they give nothing in return. Because they say it's your duty. But whenever you ask them to do something for you, where's the shekels, comrade? Where's the shekels? See, they're hypocrites. And it's the most toxic relationship you can have, is a fair-weathered friend with his hand in your pocket. And that is Ukraine. And a lot of people are going to dismiss the Javot article as Russian propaganda, but it's actually not a new story. And it was actually published originally in Al Jazeera and The Guardian back in March. This story goes further back to December from Politico. So how can it be Russian propaganda? Because we say so, comrade. But time and time again, even now, the story is not new. It's cycling. And the fact that it's cycling shows you how overpaid and underworked a lot of elements in the media are. Now again, this is going to be primarily dismissed by the left as Russian propaganda, especially the Euro Fascists. But Zelensky's biggest supporter used to be Kirill Budanov. Now, he was allegedly handpicked recently as head of military intelligence. He's always served in some role for Zelensky. It's been over a year, I think. He's one of the longer-lasting Zelensky supporters who hasn't been either taken out for corruption, which a lot of people now speculate that it's not that they're corrupt, it's that Zelensky needs a fall guy. He needs to throw somebody under the bus to try and distract from his own. Basically, Zelensky's corruption's on record. He buys up cheap land and he rents it to government organisations through third parties in Switzerland. Now, he and 12 ministers were publicly outed back in 2022, before the war started, for corruption. But suddenly, all that is forgotten, comrades. The party is always right. Now, this man is one of Zelensky's supporters. He has actually publicly stated he wants to see the head cut off the stake, so to speak. That is, a surgical strike on Putin. But after the publication of the state of Ukraine's finances and economy, and the World Bank saying, you need more money to rebuild your economy than your economy can raise in that same time period. Basically, Russia has put the nail in your coffin, mate. Okay? And he knows it now. He suddenly realizes that 5,600 a year, coming once the war is over, ain't going to come anymore. Okay? Ukraine is going to have to slash everything. It's collapsed. They have to slash wages, they have to slash government, and they're going to have to rely on foreign aid for decades to rebuild. He and his friends are not going to be very popular long after the war. We saw this, right, with the decline in popularity of many world leaders, and other than Stalin, of course, who had control of the situation. But I'm saying, you look at the decline of Churchill, you look at the decline of many world leaders, Churchill was not so much, but many public figures, you don't remember them. I mean, the rise and fall of de Gaulle. France wanting to get over the war, and all de Gaulle had is, I've run the war for you. And it's like, no, you didn't. And France not wanting to be in NATO, well, we had to be strong. You couldn't stand up to the German army. I mean, come on. And this is the problem. They, time and time again, keep circling back to World War II. They can't move on from it. And eventually, what's going to happen is Ukraine is going to have that problem. I'm the man who saved Ukraine. I stopped the Russians. And everybody's going to go, no, you didn't. Eventually, it's like Churchill. Everybody says, yeah, you gave us hope in our darkest hour, but other than that, no, bro, you didn't win the war. And it's the same with Stalin. People say, yeah, you're great, you helped, but we look at the archives and cable after cable. Okay, the only way, I think Putin knows this too, the only way Stalin won the war, so to speak, was the fact that a third of America's economy was being pumped into Russia. And I'm saying I think Putin knows this because he knows that if America switches to a war economy, it collapses. Okay, you look at how long America took to recover after World War II. Okay, if it wasn't, and this time you won't have all that, let's say, resources that it's not like, hey, we went into Nazi Germany and looted it and voila, our economy, floated until the 70s and then collapsed. But that's it. You can't, Ukraine might have some reserves, might not have enough. We don't know. These are all estimates until they're realised that all that money that Ukraine has sat on now for, all those resources that Ukraine has sat on for now, they need that and they can't exploit that. And if they do, the price of those minerals goes down and they're just languishing as just another failed state. The only way forward now for Ukraine, and I think Krill knows this, is a ceasefire. The sooner they get out of the war, the sooner they're rebuilding, and people like him might actually be safe, because the bureaucracy, if he could pivot to the permanent bureaucracy rather than the political appointee, I think he's safe. He just has to play the middle, not oppose Zelensky, not support Zelensky, not support the war, not oppose the war. But as the Ukrainian army struggles to bring in conscripts, the internal problems keep getting more and more, and they can't deal with both the war and internal conflicts, because already they're stretched at the resources for the war. Macron has rejected the proposal for an immediate unconditional truce. Why? Oh, that's right, because the war economy is propping up Europe. And again, this is all because the old folks in Europe keep voting for their selfish healthcare systems and keep wanting to suck the nations dry while having given nothing in return for their entire lives. They've been nothing but wasteful consumers, contributing nothing. The economies of the world are fake. Okay? It's a big pile of garbage. Some estimates say that China has faked the economies from the beginning, that all these 16% growths, it's all foreign money, and it's just basically they go, well, look, somebody invested Apple's worth $1 trillion, and 16% of Apple's 60% of Apple's factories, or 90% of Apple's factories, are in China. So it's our economic growth, comrades. Apple, seriously, I think they should look at building in Ukraine. I think some of these big American companies, I think some of these big European companies, they need to distribute, bring back manufacturing, make importing. I know why a lot of countries import, because a lot of companies cannot produce enough goods for both their import and export market. So they focus on their export markets and import the stuff they cannot produce enough of. The problem is that they destroy the job, long-term viability, and create more unemployment. They don't create conditions for their own people, and when their economy booms, they bring in lots of foreigners, thinking that they'll go away, but because these foreigners come from poor countries, they'd rather be a bum in the West than a bum in the East, or the South, or whatever you want to call it. The third world is the third world. You import the third world, it stays the third world. And to get Ukraine out of the third world may actually require not the presence of troops in NATO or EU membership, but European cooperation. I, however, have no hope for such a return to European cooperation, because the European bureaucracy only cares about power, not what's best And that is the same with every bureaucracy. Now, to compare maps, and to go around the map a bit further in detail, is basically you can see that lots of action, lots of you'll see tomorrow whether or not there's expansion or not, but from the previous action there's only a bit of movement on the map, but not much. But it is in most places not changed enough to be fully noticeable on the immediate pass. But you can see they're proceeding up here, as I said they would. They're proceeding to close off here and here. We'll see whether or not within the week they reach this. There's not much between here and there. It's mostly the artilleries from around that's slowing down the Russians, and the lack of their own. But you can see as they tumble down through here, they are not looking to cut this off and come down. They're looking to come through and up. But we'll see whether or not they sweep through and cut off from the north, or whether they sweep through here, cutting this off, and yeah. We'll see what happens. But it takes 6 to 8 weeks for armies to move, because remember, it's food, it's water, it's military supplies. They are under fire. And they do not have the overwhelming majority like they did. Well, they don't have millions like they did in World War II. And if they were to do so, such a mobilization would collapse the Russian economy, plunge Europe into war in panic. But as you can see, there's not much difference between the two maps, and you can see 2/3 of Donetsk, 2/3 of Zaporozhye, and 2/3 of Kherson, and very little of Kharkiv, very little. You'd see the buffer zone is very small in comparison to the rest of the country, and you can see the majority of drone strikes on Russia are on this here, because it's an attack on the Russian economy, not an attack because the gas producing here is very rich. Okay. It's very cheap and easy for Ukraine to lash out like a child. There's no political blowback because Zelensky plays the oppression narratives of the left for all it's worth. He appeals to the EU as a lost puppy looking for a new master. And that's what the left like. They like narratives. They like slogans. They like underdog stories. So they're never going to tell you the truth. Everything always has to be the overwhelming odds. You know the story. We've overcome the odds. But in real life, those stories are rare, far few between. Most of the time, and you see around the world, people like Zelensky come and go all the time. They lie. People know they lie, but nothing ever happens to them because in politics, the party's always right, and it's getting pathetic how political animals just refuse to accept reality. And I think, sure, there's a possibility America can the National Defense surface-to-air missile that could be deployed in Ukraine. It's much faster, longer range than the Patriot. But then you'll have it. But then what? You prolong the war. And if you press Russia too hard, what are you going to expect them to do? There'll be a summit. There'll be a round of summits. And then China will start sending men. Because China, well, if Korea attacks Korea, somebody's going to do something to pretty much make sure that BRICS comes out on top in Europe. And Europeans brought this on themselves by wanting to break up Russia, constantly talking about breaking up Russia, and playing stupid games with mass migration and politics, because all these school teachers want their jump for life. We got a jump for life. We need a jump for life. You want a jump for life? Be a farmer. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support the channel on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. You can find it in the description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Please and thank you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.